Topping today's news, Prime Minister Davis leads the Bahamas contingent to the COP29 in Azerbaijan. Bahamians impacted by earthquakes on Cuba and Jamaica. The opposition blames the high cost of living on decisions by the Prime Minister and a landlord stabbed to death in the Black Village community. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jarino Saunders. This is your JCN Evening News. It's a pleasure to have you join us. The United States says 2024 will be the hottest year on record. So as the annual climate conference begins in Baku, Azerbaijan, a particular focus will be on how countries plan to limit long-term global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees Celsius, a target set by the Paris Agreement in 2015. The world has already missed the original target. Prime Minister Philip Davis is one of 200 world leaders participating in COP29. Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell is also at that climate conference and shared some of what the Prime Minister has done in the first few days there in Baku.
Prime Minister's basically been in meetings all of the last few days trying to sort out what our position is going to be on actualizing the funding for loss and damage and mitigation, and trying to get the funding in place which would allow us to solve some of the extreme weather impacts that we've been experiencing and that going forward. And secondly, we have to get this actualization of the market for carbon credits so that the country can begin to earn some money from the seagrasses, which is, I think they're saying 40% of the seagrasses of the world are in the Bahamas. It's a great carbon sink, and they've created a market for this. And the question is, how do you monetize this? How do you quantify it? So there's a lot of discussion going back and forth on this.
In his previous term, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement on climate change. Several respected news agencies have reported that he will withdraw again when his second presidency begins in January. Mr. Mitchell said because of the previous policy decisions under Trump, there is an air of uncertainty with regards to the United States and how that will impact the climate conference.
The conference is actually affected, though, more than anything else, I suspect, on the fact of the American elections and the incoming president and his position with regard to the science and their commitment to this. So everybody's watching very carefully. Don't think there's a political level representation by the Americans here. And so they'll be represented at a technical level. That may largely be because after the 20th of January, no one can say what the political position is going to be.
COP29 runs until November 22nd. After a 6.8 magnitude earthquake shook southeast Cuba on Sunday, which also impacted Jamaica, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs advised Bahamians in Cuba to follow all of the instructions given by the local authorities and to take all necessary precautions. The earthquake is said to have caused landslide, damage to homes, and power outages. No deaths or injuries have been reported yet. Today, Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell expressed the government's concerns for the Cuban economy and what that could mean for the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean in terms of illegal migration.
All of us in CARICOM are very concerned about the situation in Cuba. Cuba's had two major hurricanes this year, one just as recently as within the last month, and now you've got this earthquake. Speaking to our staff over in Cuba, the major impact seems to be, of course, the power has been off for a long period of time, and our students are adversely affected by that. I've asked them to make a check to make sure everybody's okay. So far, everyone's okay. But the Caribbean and the CARICOM countries have been trying to lead an effort to try and provide food and support for Cuba because the political and economic embargo by the United States government has caused serious problems. And of course our interest is mainly the security interest from our point of view, quite apart from the comradeship between us, but the fact that whenever there's an economic situation in Cuba, it affects us adversely in terms of the migrant flows from Cuba.
The United States Geological Survey said the epicenter of the earthquake was located about 25 miles offshore from Cuba's southeast coast. There was also reports of a number of earthquakes on Jamaica on Sunday. Mr. Mitchell also addressed that situation as well.
We've been in touch with our students in Jamaica because there were 2 earthquakes yesterday back to back in Jamaica, and they were expecting a 3rd one last night. I spoke to the student leadership there to find out whether everybody in Jamaica was fine. It appears so. The Prime Minister spoke also to the leadership there and told them that if there's anything that occurs, please get in touch with us to see whether or not we can assist in any way.
Fred Mitchell, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. In a scathing voice message released on the weekend, opposition leader Michael Pintard placed the blame of the high cost of living squarely on the shoulders of Prime Minister Philip Davis.
Tens of thousands of Bahamians are hurting. And rather than the Prime Minister come up with sensible proposals on how to alleviate the pain they are experiencing, he blames the Bahamian people by saying it's your choices that have put pressures on your head. When the truth of the matter is, a number of the pressures have come from the Prime Minister's choice to reject good advice on how to keep the cost of electricity down. Hence, Bahamians are having to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying food or paying rent. It was the Prime Minister's choice to put VAT on breadbasket items and feminine products and baby foods. It was his choice to reward contractors who were close to his organization and whose contracts clearly were far more expensive than the work they are doing on behalf of the Bahamian people, while there were other small contractors who could not be paid.
Mr. Pintard's comments come after Mr. Davis said last week while at the Energy Summit that in many instances the cost of living is high because of the choices some people make. Pintard also accused the Davis administration of paying out large secret settlements and traveling extensively with large contingents. He says the Prime Minister is pointing the finger when it is him who is failing the Bahamian people.
We go to so many functions that begin with a reception, end with a cocktail party, when funds are needed to buy medicines in the clinic, to buy diagnostic equipment and medicine in our hospitals. The Prime Minister is failing to do his job, yet he wishes to lecture others on taking personal responsibility. The pressures we feel are in large measure a result, Prime Minister, of your failures.
In response to the opposition this morning, PLP Chairman Fred Mitchell, he's also the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in his voice note of his own, he sought to dismiss the opposition's accusations.
This is all about taking the Prime Minister's statement about inflation, deliberately misleading the public on the study on the middle class of the University of the Bahamas. Mrs. Leslie Archer spoke at our branch last week, and if you want to know what the report actually said, go to Fred Mitchell Minute by Minute on Facebook. Do not listen to these F&M misleaders and carpetbaggers. They don't know the truth if it stared them in the face. Let me speak for Fox Hill and then for the PLP. If anyone, PLP, F&M, or Coalition of Idiot, has no food to eat because they're impecunious, the PLP tries its best, its darndest, to find food and shelter for those persons. That F&M nonsense about blaming the voter for inflation is simply bull feces. You know, you ask yourself, why do these folks think they have to lie on the PLP to win an election? The truth will set you free, F&Ms.
Again, PLP Chairman and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Fred Mitchell. And finally, in this segment, a tragedy struck the residents of Hyla Street off Blue Hill Road twice this weekend. A 57-year-old man was found stabbed to death just before 1 a.m. on Sunday. This after reports that the victim was overheard arguing with a man that he knew around 9 p.m. on Saturday. The man, believed to be the landlord, had been stabbed to the upper body. Chief Superintendent Dwight Smith, in charge of the South Central Division, was at the scene and provided the following information.
On initial arrival at the location, residents on Hyla Street, police received information that there was an argument among the landlord of this area and an unknown male. The argument ensued, became physical. The landlord, victim at this particular time, was stabbed. He deceased on scene of this resident. We are in our early stages of this investigation. We can't say what may be the reason for this matter. However, we continue to ask members of the public to assist us.
Meantime, a 41-year-old man was stabbed and beaten on the same street on Sunday morning. Police are questioning two 18-year-old men in connection with that incident. It happened around 8:30 a.m. when the victim arrived at a residence on Hyler Street when he was attacked by a group of men. The victim suffered multiple stab wounds, head injuries, and serious injuries to his upper limbs. He was transported to the hospital in a private vehicle and is currently listed in serious condition. Police encouraging residents to find alternative ways to settle disputes other than violence.
We continue to say that when it seems that it's out of your hands, the court is there, the police is there to assist you in that matter. And we ask members of the public, once you have those, to reach out to your local police divisions, and also you can reach out to the courts in the resolving these matters.
That was Chief Superintendent Dwight Smith. You're listening to JCN News. We'll take a break. We'll be right back after these commercials.